Hello, and welcome to your video about your rental addendums. The purpose of this video is to give you a better understanding of the addendums that go along with your rental agreement. Now, I'm not going to read all the addendums to you word for word, but what I am going to do is go over some of the major points. So, let's move forward and talk about the different addendums. Here we have the move-in accounting, and the purpose of the move-in accounting is to give you an understanding of what your first payment is going to look like. It also gives you an idea of what your second payment here is going to look like and how those charges are broken down. Here you have the total amount due at move-in. If there are other charges, those will be listed here as well. And then on this side, it talks about the deposits and how those have been applied. If you've paid your execution deposit, in many cases that's going to show up here over at deposit paid at move-in or prior payments. And so here is just a display of the total amount due and details about your rental agreement. The next addendum we have here is your smoke alarm and carbon monoxide alarm addendum. We discussed this in your rental agreement, but let's talk about it here again a little bit. Here it indicates which smoke alarms you have in your property, if you have a carbon monoxide alarm and what type. Here again it reminds you that you need to check at least every 6 months the batteries to make sure that the alarm is functioning properly, and also it discusses down here the fine of $250 if you fail to comply with this addendum. Here it discusses testing the smoke alarm and carbon monoxide detector, talks about the hush feature, and then down here it talks about battery replacement. One thing to note is that if you are replacing a battery that is a 10-year battery, then you'll need to make sure you use the same type of battery. And down here again it tells you that it's your responsibility to make sure that these are all functioning. And if for any reason they stop functioning, please let us know right away and we'll make sure that they get replaced or repaired. The third addendum we have here is a satellite dish installation policy. Now this addendum is not permission for you to install a satellite dish without talking to us first and getting written permission, but what it does do is kind of lays out what our policy is about having a satellite dish. So this discusses a variety of things, discusses what can be installed, locations, removal by the owner without permission. So for example, if a dish was installed without permission or was installed improperly, the owner could remove that without your consent and it would be at your expense. We also cover in this addendum additional insurance that would be needed if you're going to have a satellite dish, because there is some additional liability that goes along with that. And so over here, section 9 deals with additional insurance information. And we also discussed that you're responsible for any damage in this addendum that happens as a result of a satellite dish, whether it's improperly installed or if it becomes disconnected from what it's attached to. So again, you're going to want to read through this if you're planning on having a satellite dish, and you're definitely going to need to get permission from us, the management company, before having one actually installed. On page 2 of this addendum, it has an image here that talks about possible places that it could be installed, and over here it talks about places where it may not be installed. Over here we have your annual recycling notice. So the annual recycling notice is just something that we give out to let you know what materials can be recycled at your property, and you would see over here under the following items may be recycled, there'll be a list of different things that can be recycled. And we'll also have so many special instructions if you need those and those pertain to your particular property. And over here we have the mold and mildew addendum. The mold and mildew addendum is a very important addendum. Living in the Pacific Northwest, mold growth indoors is common. The main causes of mold growth is too much moisture generation, too little removal of moisture, and cold surfaces. And so there's many things that you can do to reduce or eliminate altogether the causes of those, which are under your control. And so this addendum addresses many of those ways. Again, this is a really important addendum to pay attention to because in the Northwest we do have a lot of mold growth indoors and moisture in our immediate environment. So some of the things that it talks about include using the bath fan for 30 minutes to an hour after showering or bathing. If you don't have a bathroom fan at your property, you're going to want to open a window. Using exhaust fan when you're cooking, so if you're cooking or boiling. If your laundry area has a fan, you'll want to make sure that you use that. You'll also want to limit the number of houseplants in the property. One of the other issues is people sometimes fail to raise or open their shades or blinds as frequently as needed, and so we really recommend doing this daily if possible, and that's discussed here. It's indicated extremely important because this is oftentimes where you see a lot of growth with mold and mildew in a property. You'll also want to allow an inch between furniture and walls, so that way there's good airflow and circulation and provides heat to those different surfaces. Another important thing is that at all times you need to keep the property at 60 degrees or above Fahrenheit. Lower temperatures can cause mold growth. You'll also never want to turn off heat to any of the rooms, and so that's important that any room in the property is also heated. Down here we discuss cleaning up spills, so if you have a spill or overflow somewhere in the property, you're going to want to make sure you address that immediately. And then down here, if you have any leaks at the property, this is something as the management company we want to know about right away. We would like to catch a problem when it's a small issue before it turns into a larger problem. So if you have any issues with your plumbing system or leaks, please let us know right away. Here it discusses basically what to do if you have mold in the property and you notice it. The first thing you're going to do is immediately scrub it off with soap and water and then rinse the area and make sure that it's dry. If that happens and you've cleaned it and the mold returns, or if you're not able to remove it, then please contact our office right away and we'll have somebody come out and evaluate it. And then down here it discusses a really important detail, which is that if you fail to comply with any of these guidelines and there's damage to the property as a result of mold or mildew, you could be financially responsible for that damage. The next addendum we have is our smoking policy addendum. All of our properties actually don't allow smoking on the premises, and so there's many areas in this addendum that talk about if there were certain areas that allowed it, but smoking is actually prohibited on the entire premises for all the properties that we manage. And that's what this addendum discusses. The next addendum we have is a criminal activity addendum. Now, the criminal activity addendum basically describes behavior and conduct that's not allowed at the property. So if you fail to comply with this, or any of your guests do, it could result in termination of your rental agreement. Over here we have the pest control addendum. The pest control addendum starts out with us disclosing that we have no knowledge of pest infestation at the property. Here you're acknowledging that you're not going to bring in any furniture or personal property that has pests. Over here you're also having to acknowledge that any secondhand goods that are going to be brought into the property will be thoroughly inspected for the presence of pests. This addendum requires your permission that in the event there is treatment that's needed, that you'll cooperate with the management company and the exterminator and any instructions that they provide. And so here we have some preparation guidelines that you may need to follow in the event treatment is necessary for the property. Now this addendum actually goes on towards the bottom here and indicates that in the event you don't comply with the addendum or there's any damage that results from pests that is your responsibility, we could either terminate your rental agreement or you could be financially responsible. The next addendum we have here is your safety addendum. Now the safety addendum covers a wide variety of things. Some of them may not be applicable to your property. But the purpose of this addendum is to give you some general safety guidelines that are meant to cover areas of possible danger. So one of the categories that it covers is windows. Window screens are not designed to prevent people from falling out of the window, so it's important to be mindful of people around the windows when they're open. Here we discuss the use of appliances, where appliances can cause burns or harm in people if they're not handled properly or used properly. Here we talk about parking lots and how they can be dangerous. Dumpsters and trash compactors as well, if they're not used properly, can be dangerous. Here we discuss exercise equipment. Exercise equipment, if provided or on site for your property, must be properly used, or you could be seriously injured or worse. Over here we discuss swimming pools, spas, and saunas. Again, if they're not used properly, you can certainly be harmed, and anybody under the age of 14 must be supervised by an adult. Water can be dangerous. You can drown in water. Balconies, decks, and second-story walkways. This really discusses what appropriate conduct is in those areas. And then down here it discusses play areas, and play areas must be used properly, and in the event you see anything that is working improperly, please notify the management company as soon as possible. And now we're going to move on to your guide to getting your deposit back, which is a separate addendum. Now let's discuss your guide to getting your deposit back. What this is an outline of some of our move-out instructions and what we expect from you when you ultimately vacate the property. We like to provide this at the beginning of your tenancy so that you have a good idea of what we'll expect down the line. Now, the majority of this guide covers what we expect in terms of cleaning. So you'll see a lot of this has to do about cleaning. This also addresses a couple other items which have to do with returning keys to our office, and so when you do vacate the property in the future, you will need to return the keys to our office. It also reminds you to pay any final bills for the property, and one of the most important things is we definitely need you to provide a forwarding address at the time that you vacate the property so that we can properly return your final accounting and deposit. Next, we'll talk about the company addendum. The company addendum covers many of the things discussed in your rental agreement as well as the addendums already. However, you will see some new information here, and this is an opportunity for us to address some of the items that come up frequently during one's tenancy. Section 1 here deals with rent payment. It indicates that rent is due on the 1st and that you have until midnight on the 4th to make the payment, or you'll be charged a late fee. There are no exceptions to this. It also indicates here that we accept online payment of rent, certified funds, or payment by personal check. However, if you are paying by personal check, then you're only allowed to submit one check per property. Section 2 has to do with your tenant portal. We're indicating here that we will send you an invitation to that portal via email, and the portal is really something you can use to pay rent online, submit maintenance requests, and access to your ledger 24 hours a day. Section 3 here has to do with yard maintenance, and it talks about your responsibilities as a resident. For example, you're responsible for cleaning up the leaves during the fall, and it also discusses the owner's responsibility for maintaining certain aspects of the yard, such as trimming trees and bushes. Now, one of the really important points is that you're not allowed to use chemicals at the property without permission from us as the management company, because some owners do not want chemicals used in their yard or on the grounds of their property. Section 4 here has to do with utilities. It indicates the utilities you're responsible for, and that in the event that the management company or their owner pays a utility directly, you may be responsible for reimbursing them depending on the terms of your lease agreement. Section 5 has to do with some additional responsibilities. For example, if your property has a furnace that uses furnace filters, you'll need to change out that furnace filter every 3 to 6 months. If you don't change out the furnace filter and there's a service call related to that furnace, for example, the furnace is damaged because the filter was not replaced, then you would be responsible for that cost. So it's really important to replace the furnace filters as needed. This not only keeps your heating costs down, but it also improves your quality of air. Now, the other thing that you're responsible for too is for winterizing the property during freezing weather. Now we're going to move on to Section 6. Section 6 has to do with submitting maintenance requests. All maintenance requests must be submitted in writing. In the event you have an emergency, you can call the emergency line, but you will need to submit all maintenance requests in writing. The preferred way to do this is to submit the maintenance request using your tenant portal. The nice thing about using your tenant portal is that we'll be able to update your requests in real time as we respond to them. Now, it's important to keep in mind that we only check the maintenance requests during our office hours, and so if you're experiencing an emergency, you'll need to call the emergency line. Section 7 here has to do with mailbox keys. We do not rekey your mailbox prior to your tenancy if your mailbox has a lock on it. If that's something that's important to you, then you're more than welcome to contact the post office and have the lock rekeyed at your expense. However, we will need a copy of that key. Section 8 here deals with using drain clearing products such as Drano. You're not allowed to use those as they can damage the plumbing system. Also, in the event you have a clog at the property, you're not allowed to snake the line without our permission because it can damage the plumbing system or you can break the toilet. Section 9 has to do with the use of in-tank toilet cleaners such as 2000 flushes. Those are not allowed as they can damage the internal plumbing mechanisms of your toilet. You can, however, use products that clip to the inside of the bowl. Section 10 here deals with mattresses and beds. You're not allowed to have a mattress on the floor without a frame. The purpose of this is that without a frame, you're not providing proper circulation, and it can lead to things that will damage not only the floor, but also your mattress. And so, again, we discussed earlier the mold and mildew addendum. This is an important thing to prevent that from happening. Section 11 has to do with our emergency line. In the event you experience an emergency, such as fire, flood, or immediate safety hazard, then you can contact our emergency line. Here we have the emergency line number. This is a number you'll also find on our voicemail and on our website. And during your lease signing, we will provide a list of what we consider to be emergencies. And so that way you'll have an idea that if you are experiencing an emergency, if you should or should not call the emergency line. Section 12 here deals with fireplaces and wood stoves. It indicates that if you're going to be using the fireplace or wood stove, that you will need to make sure that they are cleaned annually by a qualified vendor. Number 13 has to do with cleanliness of the property. We discussed this in the lease agreement already. Section 14 here indicates that we do not collect last month's rent. We only collect your first month's rent and a deposit for the property. And so when you do ultimately vacate the premises, you need to keep in mind that you cannot apply your deposit to last month's rent and that we have not already collected that, and so you'll need to make sure that you budget to pay last month's rent. Section 14 here, or 15, excuse me, has to do with the tenant handbook. Indicates that a tenant handbook will be made available for you and that you are required to follow the tenant handbook if you're dealing with anything at the property. So you can always use that as a reference for looking at policies and procedures, and this will be something that's available through your tenant portal. And then the final thing here for your company addendum is we discuss adding and removing residents during the tenancy or at any time, whether it's a renewal time or during the tenancy. Now there is a fee of $250 per removal for us to remove a tenant, and so we're disclosing that to you here. So this concludes our video about the addendums for your property. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact our office. Thanks for watching our video.